Extra time.
Hello and welcome back to the Extra Time podcast. Now we're filming this on a Tuesday, which means we've had a day to really kind of get over the Euros. But Joe, how are you feeling? Are you still down in the dumps, or are you seeing the positives of the tournament as a whole?
No, massively down in the dumps. Massively down in the dumps. This is definitely, I think, categorically the worst I have felt after a game of football in my lifetime. I just feel honestly, genuinely upset about England losing that game. And I'm sure that'll delight a lot of non-English supporting fans. But what can you say? Yeah.
What are you most upset about?
I think we were really poor on the day. I think we didn't show up, didn't play to our best ability, weren't attacking enough. Just disappointing, man. The whole thing, everything about it. I thought the atmosphere in London was appalling. I thought the scenes at the stadium were an absolute disgrace. I thought that the players tried their best, but the penalties were really, really dismal. Yeah, just front to back, whole day was a mess, I thought.
Yeah, I do agree with you. Chris, so you're joining us too. We've never had this lineup before, I think, on any Football Daily platform at all. So, exciting times. But yeah.
This is the real trophy, mate.
This is what I've been aspiring for, a video of you two. But yeah, Chris, I mean, kind of, for me, the defeat is almost secondary now to everything else that we've seen go on, and almost don't feel too sad about the loss. I'm more just sort of upset, but also happy sort of to see the various emotions that are taking place. We've seen Rashford's mural sort of vandalised, and then people really coming together. I thought his Instagram about sort of the love and the letters that he's received, truly like tear-jerking stuff. I mean, for you, is that the same as well? Just the kind of the game's been overshadowed just by everything else that's gone on since?
It has, and you can spiral out, can't you, with the negativity. I think it is important to remember that most people are good, decent people, but there is a culture that comes with following England. It's quite insidious, I think, compared to other national teams. It just feels like a hardcore sect of the England fans treat every international fixture like one long stag do, and that's okay. If the game kicks off relatively early, there's a good chance that things might finish in a fairly civilised fashion. But yeah, when people are drinking from 11, 12 o'clock, full throttle, games on at 8 o'clock, inevitably it's going to end in embarrassment. And it did. And it wasn't a small minority. It was a smallish to medium minority. And I just hope that this England team and the way that they've raised the bar both on and off the pitch inspires the next generation of fans to sort of match their example, follow their behaviour. And yeah, I just think we let ourselves down as fans. But on the pitch, probably the better seen one. I'm not crippled with disappointment like Joe, but yeah, it was painful to see that we weren't able to change the tide that I think probably flipped from 35-40 minutes onwards. And we've been raving about sort of the fact we're a little bit more tactically fluid than in tournaments gone by, and it wasn't the case in the final, was it? I just think too little too late with the substitutions, but Gareth Southgate's got most of the decisions right, or got most of the decisions right in Euro 2020, so that's all you can ask for, really.
Yeah, it did feel a little bit like Croatia all over again when we scored a bit early. I think just sort of invited the pressure on. But anyway, we're going to have a look back at the tournament as a whole today on the podcast. And we're going to start with the team of the tournament, which they've just released. So I'll run through that quickly. They've got Donnarumma in goal, Maguire and Bonucci at centre-half, Spinazzola on the left, Kyle Walker on the right, Jorginho, Højbjerg and Pedri in midfield, and then Sterling, Lukaku and Chiesa up front. Joe, looking at that team, any queries for you? Any stinkers as far as you're concerned?
For me, I know he went out early, but I think Paul Pogba has to make that team. I understand the desire probably to get a Danish player in there because their run was so sensational. But I think I would probably drop Højbjerg for Paul Pogba in these circumstances. I think if they'd have gone 1 or 2 games deeper, then Pogba was a potential candidate to win the entire Player of the Tournament award. To be honest with you, he was that sensational. And maybe it's the bias in me popping out here, and I'm sure people will say it is, but I would have had Luke Shaw in this team. I think he was just the outstanding left back by quite some distance. I know he didn't start the first game, but as soon as he entered the fray, his attacking endeavours were just unbelievable. He was so solid on the ball. His defensive output was incredible. So the only two changes I can really think of. I understand that Spinazzola was probably the second best left back in my opinion, but Luke Shaw was just, he was just the best left back at the tournament, I think. So those were my changes.
All right, Chris, what about you? I mean, Lukaku up front, that's a bit of a... I'm quite surprised to see him there. He had a good tournament, don't get me wrong, and he was certainly... We'll talk about Belgium a bit later. He was certainly I'd say their standout player along with De Bruyne. But, I mean, Schick got finished on 5 along with Ronaldo. You know, incredible from Ronaldo again. Are you surprised not to see either of their names there?
It highlights the fact that, you know, no traditional number 9 really had an exceptional tournament, right? Yeah, I'm actually fairly comfortable with this team. And actually, considering how poor Belgium were at the back, I think De Bruyne and Lukaku masked a lot of their deficiencies in their games. I wasn't impressed with them once, actually, and I thought they were very, very fortunate to beat Portugal. So, yeah, in a sense, I suppose Lukaku carried his nation more so than other candidates for this role. Schick would have been... feels a little bit more speculative. I mean, he probably overperformed, but more so than other candidates. But I'm comfortable with this team.
I think Chiellini should have been in there over Bonucci as well. I think he was the better of the two Italian centre-halves.
Yeah, they've been quite rigorous with where that player plays, right? They've gone Maguire on the left-hand side, Bonucci on the right-hand side. Yeah, I think it is harsh leaving Chiellini out, particularly as he put on a masterclass in the final.
Yeah, the only thing I can assume is Bonucci played more minutes than him across the whole tournament. That's the only...
Yeah, the injury, of course.
We're releasing, it'll come out today if you're listening to this via audio, unless on video yesterday. We've actually released our team of the seasons, the competition. That was McCubbin and I. There are some different names in here. I'm looking forward to the comments.
Who are they different? Are we not allowed to say yet? Spoilers.
The goalkeeper's different. We didn't go for Donnarumma, which is an interesting one. And Pogba's in there along with Schick as well. Other than that, it's pretty much on the money. And we have included Kylian.
You boys didn't go for Shaw either?
No, we didn't. To be honest, if you even like Joachim Meiler, numbers-wise, had a better competition. I know a lot of people might sort of disagree with that, but Joachim Meiler's impact forward and backwards was incredible. Although, I mean, Luke Shaw could quite comfortably have made the team. It's just, I think you had to honour like the level of the heights that Spinazzola hit, certainly in the early stages of the tournament. But, I mean, go check out that video on the platform. We might as well roll on with the rest of the pod, because what we wanted to do is like hand out some awards to the players, some of the various aspects of the competition. We'll start with best player then. I've made a little shortlist here. I've got Chiellini, we've got Donnarumma, Sterling, and then Pedri. Chris, you were very adamant about Pedri, which I absolutely love that shout. We'll start with Donnarumma because he was named UEFA's player of the tournament, only conceded 4 times in the whole competitions, with all those goals coming in the knockout rounds. You know, save for Morata in the shootout versus Spain, then twice again in the final. I mean, his save percentage for Milan was always incredible when it came to penalties. He's just such an enormous figure in the goal. I mean, Chris, how do you feel about that as player of the tournament, and also for a 22-year-old, like, how do you assess his career so far? Because it is almost becoming the stuff of legend, and we're only a few years in.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Over 200 appearances for Milan as well. I think it was 250 in all competitions, actually, by the time he'd signed that pre-contract with PSG. I'm comfortable with it. It's quite surprising that this tournament yielded almost 2.8 goals a match, which was up from, I think, a flat 2 in Euro 2016. Yet it's a goalkeeper that's taking the plaudits, and it's also a little bit juxtaposed with the way that Italy played through the majority of the tournament, right? This was an exciting Italian team to watch. I mean, they dug in a little bit of shades of Catenaccio against Spain. But yeah, the goalkeepers walked away with it. I think that's probably says more about his exploits in penalty shootouts, right, than how often he was called into action throughout the fixture, because Italy were in the group stage at the very least in the top 3 teams for possession. They were in the top 3 teams for shots on the opposition's goal, and also in terms of limiting activity around their own goal. So not a lot for him to do in the group stage, but yeah, he was extremely decisive at those critical moments. And there's just a bit of an aura about him, isn't it? It's easier said now that they've won the tournament, but I mean, even as a non-Italian, in the build-up to the game against England, like he just instilled you with confidence watching him in between those sticks. And he had a few hairy moments, actually, distributing. Yeah. I will say that. As did a lot of keepers in this game. I think this was one of the few tournaments I've seen like a lot of teams press quite high in quite a relentless fashion throughout like the entirety of it. Made it a little bit harder for goalkeepers, I guess. But yeah, he's the safe pick. There is more interesting shouts, though.
All right, Joe, who would you go for? Who was your player of the tournament, do you reckon?
I think Donnarumma was the exceptional goalkeeper of the tournament, there's no doubt. And in my head, it almost was like his announcement to fans that haven't maybe been able to catch AC Milan over the last few years, of being one of the top 3 goalkeepers in the world already at that young age. He's that good, I think, that PSG... I mean, it's just an outrageous signing by them. I'm sure he's on horrendously high wages, but it's just an outrageous signing on a free transfer, isn't it? But no, I wouldn't have given it to Gianluigi Donnarumma. I think there were better players in that Italy side. I think Chiellini, in my head, was probably Italy's best player across the course of the tournament, particularly throughout the knockout rounds. So I would probably have given my player of the tournament to Chiellini. You know, I think there were question marks coming into this tournament over him and Bonucci, whether or not it was one tournament too far for them. You know, Chiellini at 36, could he still do it on this top of top stages? And undoubtedly, him and Maguire, I would say, were the 2 best centre-backs at the tournament. And I just think that his leadership in that Italian side just cannot go underrated. So I would have given it to Chiellini probably. But I think Raheem Sterling pushes it very, very close, to be honest with you.
I think in terms of Italy players, like, my order, you know, might have changed following the final and Chiellini putting in such a shift. But, like, Jorginho has been their mainstay. He's been probably the most crucial component in that side. So I think, for me, like, Chiellini and Jorginho, 1 and 2, you could swap that out, you know, pretty judiciously.
Yeah, it's close. I agree.
And then Donnarumma probably in that 3 spot. So I am surprised that an outfield player didn't get it, but... yeah, penalties. Penalties was so many fixtures went to penalties, didn't they? It was bananas. So that maybe that's why.
Yeah, Jorginho is a really good shout as well. Jorginho was just outrageous across the course of the tournament, as he has been for the majority of the season for Chelsea, particularly since Tuchel's taken over as well. Just his ability defensively is so underrated. I think he put out more interceptions at this tournament than anybody has in European Championship history, didn't he? I think the last beating Marcel Desailly, right? So people say that he's not good enough off the ball, you know, he's not physical enough. What an absolute mockery it makes of that sort of chat that I'm sure I've probably been involved in the past, because he obviously has found a system that works for him perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't have beat Spain without him, would they? Like, he's... not only is he like got these patterns of play, like just, you know, he can execute them in his sleep, but he's also just super press resistant, super cool under pressure, and he enabled Mancini to change the way they play sort of like wholesale in that semi-final. Yeah, I think I would go with him, but I did think Pedri deserved a shout.
Yeah, I mean, you say Pedri, Chris, because the Spain game was probably the one clash. We talked about it a bit last week on the podcast, where Italy's midfield almost met their match, didn't they? In terms of sort of Busquets and Pedri really sort of going at them and not giving them any time on the ball at all. I mean, Pedri, I was just reading about some of the records he's broken in the tournament. He covered more distance. I think it was 6 kilometres more than any other player in the tournament, and he covered the most distance of possession when on the ball as well. And he didn't even play in the final. Jorginho was second, I think, in both those regards there, along with sort of Calvin Phillips coming in third. I mean, it's frightening to think he's 18. How many major tournaments he's going to have coming up? The kind of impact this guy could make going down the line, isn't it? I
mean, we've often been accused of being stat merchants, but I think when it comes to like knowing football, what I think Pedri has been, like a lot of people have said to me, like, how can he be in the conversation for best player when his output has been so minimal in terms of goals and assists? And that is when I just, you know, stop having that conversation with those people, because they are clearly not watching him. Like, he just makes, you know, every purist will love Pedri. Just the weight of every pass, the way he just strokes it in front of people, And that, hello, that sounded a bit suspect there. But just an unbelievably technically gifted footballer, and yeah, just a little magician. Everything he does looks effortless. Like, he will receive the ball under any amount of pressure and do something progressive with it, or or maintain possession. Like, mature is the word that's been bandied about quite heavily when the conversation revolved around Pedri. But yeah, it just a super old head on young shoulders. Yeah. Busquets was superb in that semi-final as well.
No, true. All right, we'll reluctantly accept Donnarumma as the best player with Kylian.
Well, who are you going to say, Hennes? Who was yours?
I was going to probably go for Kylian. I think he was great. I really enjoyed him this tournament as well. But I mean, Raheem Sterling, I think we said it in the VO for our 11 team this season. Like, one of the most memorable English performances at a major tournament I can certainly remember across the entire campaign. It was just 100%. Unbelievable. Yeah. So I mean, yeah. Well, Donnarumma though, fair enough. And between him and Pedri, got a lot of excitement over the next few years to come. Anyway, we'll move on to the best game. I think this is going to be a really interesting one because Joe, when I asked you, you immediately went for Spain versus Croatia on probably the greatest day of international football back-to-back games that there ever was, in my opinion, with that and France and Switzerland. Because I would go for France and Switzerland personally. Okay. France versus Switzerland. Why do you think the Spain-Croatia game tips it?
The reason I went for the Spain-Croatia game was I thought that extra time was better in that game. I like penalties is obviously entertaining, but I'll prefer to see 30 minutes of really entertaining action, and I think that's what you got in that Spain versus Croatia game, to be honest with you. I think when Ferran Torres scored the third goal, I think everybody thought that game was a write-off, as they did with the France-Switzerland game, obviously when Pogba whipped it top bins. But there was something about that Croatia comeback that I thought, oh my God, it couldn't actually happen, could it? Turn around under these circumstances, against a team that's able to retain the ball so well as Spain, to turn the game around is just incredibly difficult, because Spain can literally just pass you to death for the final 20 minutes of a match with the score of 3-1, especially against what has been labelled like an ageing Croatia side that's not got the legs it did at the World Cup 2018. And I just felt like extra time was what kind of tipped it. That Morata takedown and finish in particular was just phenomenal. Whereas the France-Switzerland game, I felt like extra time was a bit flatter. So I'll go for Spain-Croatia, but I can see the arguments of France-Switzerland with the World Cup champions being knocked down pens.
Yeah, that was mad about that game is Unai Simon in the start of extra time. He made that save from Kramaric, didn't he?
Kramaric, Christ, how did he miss 6 yards out? It's just the most awful finish.
Yeah, it was true. I mean, the France-Switzerland game, we've got best moment coming up, and I think the Gavranovic goal, that Xhaka pass to set up that's one of my favourite kind of goals of the whole tournament. We'll get on to that. I mean, Chris, are there any other contenders in your eyes, or is it a straight shot between these two? Because actually, Italy versus Spain was probably as good as two great sides going at each other that you'll ever see.
Yeah, when you messaged me about this, my instinct was France versus Switzerland, mainly for that Xhaka performance. Like, that is one of the best individual performances I think I saw at this tournament. And any given tournament, he was absolutely unplayable. Like, the array of passing from him in that game was like truly mesmerising. Yeah, Spain-Croatia was probably funner. Like, it was more chaotic, wasn't it? And some of the Spanish defending was awful. And it was pretty impressive. I think their like forward six really had to carry a kind of makeshift defence at times, didn't they? The Spanish, and I suppose like the front three was quite interchangeable as well. So the fact that it's pretty impressive from Luis Enrique and mainly Busquets and Pedri that Spain got better with each game despite a revolving cast of players. Yeah, I think the quality was just better in France versus Switzerland. I get what Joe's saying. Extra time, it did peter out a little bit in extra time, but that's because the Swiss were largely holding on, weren't they?
Yeah.
But yeah, Italy versus Spain. I think like that. Chiesa announcing himself as a big game player there. Morata scoring that lovely goal, then missing the penalty. The most like hallmark Morata performance you could possibly hope for. No, I think I'd go France versus Switzerland. What about you? What are you saying?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I'm going France versus Switzerland. So, Joe, unfortunately, you have been outvoted on this one.
Heartbreaker.
You hate to see it.
What can
But
you
yeah,
do?
Denmark versus Russia, that was pretty fun as well. Can't write off. I think atmosphere-wise, that must be one of the best outside of Wembley. But yeah, France versus Switzerland, what a game. I loved on the WhatsApp chat, the FD WhatsApp chat, every time Morata, he would score and then he'd get one-on-one with the keeper and he'd like balloon it left or right and you sort of be like, oh, he's back again. Here he is.
Classic.
So yeah,
Yeah.
we'll move on to the biggest disappointment then. This could be interesting. This could be because Chris, we'll start with Belgium. You said Belgium to me. I mean, when I was sort of writing it down, I mean they did win every group game 3-0, 2-1, 2-0.
Yeah,
they did beat Portugal, which isn't too bad, but they are pretty dull. Like only 9.6 shots per game, which was the 19th best in the whole competition. But I mean, what is your overarching kind of anger against Bobby Martinez's side?
Nothing against Bobby Martinez because his record has been absolutely superb since taking over. But they, and obviously it was an aging backline. People knew that coming into the tournament, and it was high risk playing Hazard as a left wing back, and they had to endure a few injuries, I guess, like KDB in and out the side. And was it they swapped like Vermaelen came back in for Denier after game 1 or game 2, which only made the backline older. Like they did okay, I guess, considering the average age of the defence and the speed of that defence. But they were just disappointing to watch. Like Denmark, I think, should have beat them. I'm not sure if I watched the Finland game, actually. And Russia were absolutely pants, weren't they? And like I said, Portugal were the much better side in that knockout tie. I think I was just most disappointed with Belgium, given the talent they had at their disposal, particularly the forward talent. If we're gonna like concede that the back line, there's not much more he could have done with the back line, I guess. I just thought they were drab, man. And like without KDB, it could have been a bit of a national embarrassment. But there we go. Like that is effectively like the end of I don't know who's emerging. My Jupiler Pro League knowledge is...
I think Doku had a bit of a breakthrough tournament. Like I think
he had a breakthrough match against Portugal, didn't they? Like I think people got a little bit carried away with that performance. No, against who did they lose to in the end? France. Was it France?
Italy,
sorry. He was great when they lost, but
yeah, he's been fairly poor since moving to Rennes, I think, as well last year. So it was good to see him sort of turn up. But I mean, Joe, when I asked you straight away, you went after Kylian and Mbappe as your biggest disappointment.
I feel like I've maybe misinterpreted the way this question was laid out. As in, I was most disappointed to see Mbappe struggle. I really wanted him to do fantastically well at this tournament and come out of it as top goal scorer and really take on that mantle after what has been a really impressive season with PSG, as potentially like the next king of the hill. If we're talking like disappointing, then obviously it's Turkey. They were utter shit throughout the whole tournament. Like not a single performance that they put in was acceptable. Like front to back, absolute useless crap. Like Yilmaz was unbelievable this season domestically, and honestly looked like a pubber up front for Turkey. So if we're talking like disappointment like that, then I definitely think it's Turkey. But most disappointing for me personally was Mbappe. I don't think it was necessarily all his fault either, because he had some absolutely electric moments, and you can still see the quality shine through. But I just wanted him to come out of this tournament with the golden boot as potentially the best player, and it just didn't happen for him. And I think that penalty was just one of those moments where I was absolutely gutted for him, to be honest with you.
How far did you have Turkey going on your We Need to Talk?
I think round of 16 or quarterfinals potentially. And what a load of nonsense that was. I don't know what I was thinking, to be honest with you. They were absolutely appalling.
No, you weren't alone at all. I read an article about it in The Athletic, and since Turkey have relaxed their foreign players rule, and each club can have a maximum of 14 players. Apparently, like the game time that most of the Turkish players are getting in their home country is so small. And there was just no attacking plan at all. Their strategy going forward was really bleak. So yeah, and it was just pot shots.
Their fitness looked awful.
Yeah, so bad.
Yeah, and also considering they were playing most of their games in Baku, which is sort of like a home away from home for them, it was poor. I agree with you. I think Mbappe had enough good moments. If that goal had counted, the one where he was called offside, that would have just been unbelievable. So yeah, Turkey take the biggest disappointment, and I was one of those who backed them at the very start to go deep into the tournament.
Yeah, I mean they're definitely worst. I'm still not sure about. I suppose I did have them as dark horses, but I also like. People have been really like snooty with people putting Turkey forward as a dark horses, haven't they? But like it's a gamble. By nature, it's a gamble, and their form coming into the tournament was decent, but they fell. They fell hard, didn't they? From beating getting 4 points against France and beating the Netherlands. The Netherlands actually, how are they getting away with without a shout in this section?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think it's just because none of us expected them to do well. We all think De Boer's a crap manager and the team's average them.
That is true. That is true.
That is essentially what played out when they faced one sort of half-decent opposition in the Czech Republic. So yeah, all right. The Netherlands get a special mention for biggest disappointment. But we'll go to best goal because there's been some unreal goals in this tournament. I think it's been pretty good. Shaqiri popping up with a few stunners. But I personally don't think you can't overlook Patrick Schick's goal against Scotland, 100%. The longest goal in Euros history. It was unreal. Like just watching David Marshall sort of flopping backwards into the net is like quite an iconic moment, I think. But
it was actually great that game, and that's the overriding memory of it.
Yeah, that is. Oh, well, that's tough luck. But yeah, I also love that Benzema goal against Switzerland. Just that first touch, which sort of outside of his body to bring it in and then flick it over Jan Sommer. I think that was my other sort of favourite goal. But is there any other goal that it could be, Joe, in your opinion? I've got Pogba written down here. I've got Chiesa and Insigne, some of their goals as well. But for me, it was Patrick Schick.
It has to be Patrick Schick, doesn't it? I think it's just an insurmountable task to even come close to a goal from 40 or 50 yards out on the left peg. And the way David Marshall goes into the net makes it even better. I totally agree. Pogba's was, outrageous. But I've seen Pogba do that before. Like, I've never seen Patrick Schick slap one in from 50 yards. So I think it has to be Patrick Schick.
So I'm going to be controversial. I don't get excited by those long distance finishes because they are so speculative. Like the technique, great, but you are just hitting and hoping. Whereas like Pogba, Insigne, I get so much satisfaction.
That's so harsh to say. That's
so much satisfaction from seeing them finesse it from that position because that is pure unadulterated technique and vision and execution. Like the Schick's is a great goal, I can't deny that, but there's more luck in that goal than there is like a Pogba or an Insigne. So while it was good, maybe it's the Scottish bias in me, but while it was good, I think I'm going to go for one of the latter. But yeah, I've been outvoted, haven't I? So it's Schick.
Well, I think Pogba's celebration ruins it for me. It'd been all good if he'd scored.
Which one of the 7 are you talking about?
when he to celebrate for a minute and a half and then lose the game, I think that's just unforgivable. Can't bounce back from that. But yeah, to hit Schick looked up, he saw him off his line, and to get kind of the swerve that he did as well, I think it is a lot harder than perhaps people are giving him credit for. There,
everyone's giving him credit, isn't it? I feel like I'm I'm probably shortchanging him, but like, yeah. Okay, I just think there's just much more luck riding on that. But yeah, execution perfect.
All right, Schick's goal it is. But we'll move on to sort of biggest surprise here. And Joe, I messaged you saying which player who maybe you didn't know about before, who you kind of developed a sort of an affiliation to as a result of this tournament. You said Damsgaard first off. Why have you gone for Damsgaard?
Yeah, I think Damsgaard was probably breakthrough star of the tournament for me. In terms of a player that I don't religiously follow Serie A to the point that I know every Sampdoria player inside out and what they're capable of doing. But I think Damsgaard's level of this in this tournament was absolutely outrageous, to be honest with you. For a 21-year-old, he could have comfortably been in contention for the best young player at the tournament. If I don't know what age that caps at, is it 23? Is it 21? If it is 21, then he's certainly in contention for it. I think it has to be Pedri overall. But yeah, I just thought he was absolutely exceptional. Was it 3 goal involvements for the Danes this season. Hadn't massively heard of him coming into this one. I'd heard the links to the likes of Tottenham Hotspur, which I don't think would be a brilliant fit given what I've seen at this Euros. Him kind of playing his best football, coming as an inverted winger off that left-hand side, where Son sort of occupies that similar sort of space for Tottenham Hotspur. But certainly he's got a higher ceiling than Sampdoria. No offence to any Sampdoria fans watching this game, because he's an extremely progressive dribbler. I thought his delivery into the box was sensational. And no offence to Poulsen and Martin Braithwaite, but if he was playing alongside a slightly more elite number 9, I think he would be producing even higher numbers. So yeah, I think Mikkel Damsgaard, is it has to be for me. I don't know who comes close.
That's interesting, because I had a look at for Atalanta last year. He scored 2 and assisted 4, and he was actually mainly a bench option. He sort of started as many games as he was benched. So I wonder if it's just because
he'd only just moved, though, hadn't he, to Sampdoria? He'd only just moved earlier, like last year. I think this is still Ranieri was just rotating in and out, but it was kind of his breakout campaign. So I think he got a decent amount of minutes though, didn't he?
Yeah, I think the Sampdoria chairman's rubbing his hands together after this tournament. He's bumped up that price tag by a few million. Chris, anyone else in your opinion who it could be? I've got down here Joachim Mæhle and Leonardo Spinazzola, who was kind of slightly unheralded, even I think within Italy. I mean, he plays for Roma, obviously a great side, but the level that he hit was unreal this tournament. And then Joachim Mæhle as well is sort of only playing for Genk until January, then got his 10 million move to Atalanta, and now just looks to be almost the perfect replacement for Robin Gosens when he inevitably leaves. I mean, do you think either of those two players, or is there anyone else you think who could push Damsgaard close as perhaps the biggest surprise?
I mean, Jan Sommer had an incredible tournament. I feel like we should probably put a little bit of respect on his name in this podcast. Forsberg was also carrying Sweden's attack. Yeah. A very defensively resolute Sweden. Lindelof was also impressive when I watched Sweden, but one that really struggled in attack. Obviously, Isak played well in a 2 or 3 game burst. But yeah, I mean, Mæhle, Atalanta know a good fullback when they see one, don't they? Hateboer, Gersons, have obviously Castagna before they offloaded him to Leicester for a fairly sizable fee. So I'm excited to see what he can do under Gasperini in Bergamo. Gersons, I think 20. Has he scored 20 goals since the start of the 2019-20 season?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that might be the stat that was doing the rounds, which is...
Where's he going then?
Which is
frightening. Somewhere?
Well, he was linked with Barcelona, but Barcelona don't have any money. They can't even register the new signings, so I think that's just rubbish paper talk. I imagine him... I mean, they are the second or third best side in Italy right now, so I imagine and he's being deployed in a system that plays to his strengths, so I imagine the temptation to move isn't as big as some people are making out. But yeah, left back, what a guy to have in your Arsenal. And like Spinazzola, a right-footed player playing on the left, which, we've not seen an awful lot of. I think Spinazzola is a classic case of Mancini just getting the chemistry down that flank spot on. I think him and Insigne just played so well together. Insigne a little bit putting a little bit more defensive work than people maybe give him credit for. Obviously, when Spinazzola stepped up, Di Lorenzo sort of made a back 3 as well, which gave Spinazzola license to sort of stay up as well and press and harry and harangue people. So I think Mancini nailed the chemistry, and that enabled Spinazzola to maybe outperform expectation. Whether that can be replicated at club level, I'm not so sure. But he's out for a long old time now, isn't he? Bless him.
Yeah. All right. I you know what? I'm gonna go Joe on this one. I think Damsgaard. I just that Danish side were just
I didn't actually vote, did I? I'd have gone Mæhle, but I'm happy with Damsgaard. Okay. Yeah.
Either way, yeah. Robin Gosens, though, I think he wants to go back to Germany. That's what I've been reading. And if you follow Transfer Talk, you'll hear all the gossip.
He's not playing in Germany, has he? He was rejected by Dortmund as a 17-year-old, and then he ended up working at a gas station. Yeah,
played for Heracles over in Holland, and then moved over. All right, we'll finish on my favourite one, which is the favourite moment of the tournament. Joe, when I asked you about this, you said it was being at Wembley to watch Harry Kane break his duck.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's quite like a personal one. Is there? Would you say that was genuinely the moment of the tournament, or
no? That obviously was a moment of the tournament. I mean, from a personal point of view, I was lucky enough to go to the Germany game, the 2-0, and the Denmark semi-final. I'm almost quite glad I didn't end up going to the final. Such was it ruined by thugs and idiots. But yeah, I have to say there was also a moment in that semi-final against the Danes where we kept the ball for I think about 3 minutes in a 53 pass sequence, England, and I really remember thinking to myself in that moment, like, this is a very different England team to England teams that have been in the past. This is a significantly more advanced side than I've had the pleasure of watching over the years, despite the fact it probably doesn't have some of the superstar names in it. It's much, much better. So I remember vividly thinking that was one of my favourite moments of the tournament. But yeah, I suppose that Switzerland equaliser, I think, was one of my favourite standout moments of the tournament too. I think that really got everybody off the seat, no matter who you supported. Like, oh my God, the Swiss are actually going to do the French here. So yeah, I would say from a neutral standpoint, probably the Swiss equaliser. But from a personal one, probably either the 53 pass sequence or that second goal in the Germany game.
All right, Chris, what about you, mate?
I also think the Gavranovic goal, like, up there for me. I also like Morata's sort of redemption arc throughout the whole tournament as well. Like, every time it seemed that he was on the cusp of being, hounded down by a mob, he seemed to come up with a goal. So I actually stood up and had like both hands in the air when he scored against Italy, and I was like, what? Where has that come from? Like, why am I such a Spain fan at current? But I think that just played into the abuse that Morata got. I just thought the general standard of play was pretty superb. Like, England's group stages, ironically, their group stage games, were pretty dull affairs, weren't they? They were pretty like cagey and a difficult watch after like 7 or 8 pints. But then it grew from there. So I think just being in London for this tournament is fantastic. Obviously, London is just so cosmopolitan. The fact that I can go 20 minutes down the road, 30 minutes to Stockwell, and sit in a Portuguese bar with like 40, 50 Portuguese fans and enjoy them beating who was it? It was when drawing with France, and then Hungary also drawing with Germany, which meant they went through. Just being there for those sort of moments was pretty special, really. And just talking to like having a Braga fan on my left and a Sporting CP fan on my right is not a situation I found myself in before. So yeah, just nice to get out there after 18 months of being locked up.
I have to say as well, I do think this was potentially the best international tournament I can remember in my lifetime in terms of entertainment. Particularly some of the games in the knockout rounds was just frightening levels of ability and stunning football in some of the games. So I do think like Euro 2020 will be remembered as one of the most entertaining international tournaments of the last couple of decades.
There was definitely a sense that the small, maybe not smaller nations like North Macedonia, but like medium nations, like the way that they've stepped it up and they can compete now. Like what's Portugal? I might embarrass myself here. What is it, like a population of 14, 15 mil? I might have got that totally wrong. But for them to be able to
10, it's 10.
Nations of that size, it feels like they can compete now with, Germany, England, France, whatever, which maybe 20, 30 years ago wasn't the case. So, I suppose like they're just so much more professional. Like they're much better at snaring players who, through the grandparent rule, so on and so forth. But yeah, smaller nations catching up can only mean more entertaining football, I guess.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this is definitely the best Euros I can remember by a country mile. I still think some of the moments at the Russia World Cup, that kind of Belgium-Japan game, which was just off the chain, sort of back and forward, and then even sort of in Brazil, that Germany-Brazil game, there's some amazing moments there. But yeah, definitely the best Euros I can remember. Yesterday I was slumped on my sofa in a real hole, and I watched a Sky Arts documentary about when Greece won the Euros. It was called King Otto.
Nice.
And then they showed the celebrations in Athens at the end, and I was like, oh, I wish it was. I just wish we'd won so bad.
I can't hear it, Emery. I can't hear it.
It was honestly euphoric, and they all crammed into the old sort of Athenian Olympic Stadium, and it was, you can imagine just Athens being next level fun. But I forgot what a boring side Greece were when they won that tournament. They basically just man-marked every team off the pitch. But yes, we will go for Gavranovic equaliser versus France as the favourite moment of the tournament. A favourite moment in such a great tournament. I can't believe the Euros is over. I mean, Joe, do you have any final thoughts on the competition? I think we'll probably be winding up our Euros content on Football Daily from here on in. But yeah, I mean, any last thoughts about the tournament as a whole?
Not really. Not really. I think the format doesn't work, and it's been announced as much, isn't it? I think it was an absolute fiasco to be hosting it in multiple countries, especially under these circumstances.
That was Platini, though, wasn't it?
Some teams were travelling thousands of miles, and others didn't have to travel at all. It was a shameful decision. So I think the organisation overall was pretty appalling. But yeah, I think it was a fantastic tournament, and despite the fact I am gutted about us losing the final, I think England did themselves really, really proud at this tournament. I think Southgate can go away from it with his head held high, despite the fact people are going to moan about that final performance. If you take it in a wider context, I thought England were absolutely brilliant, and some of their players are extremely young. So when we roll around to Qatar and World Cups in the future, I think we'll be looking at an even stronger England side. So I think there's plenty good days in England's future. That was just a dark day, very dark day on Sunday.
Yeah, and Chris, it's Germany in 3 years' time. I mean, that has got the foundations of one of the most fun tournaments I could possibly remember.
Yeah, now we've got sort of Russia and Qatar out of the way, which are morally very suspect. Germany, and then I'm really looking forward to, what is it, Mexico, Canada, and it's some way off,
USA.
And the US for the, is it the next World Cup? Yeah, the World Cup after. That is going to be incredible. So yeah, 2 huge tournaments to look forward to. Like Joe said, an extremely young squad that hopefully will grow rather than be scarred, following the loss of the final. I do think we're like one world-class central midfielder away from having an unbelievable team, and hopefully Bellingham is that guy. Not that I want to put too much pressure on his shoulders, but if his trajectory continues as is, then yeah, I think he could be, I don't want to say the missing piece, because we're always looking for a missing piece, aren't we? But a box-to-box with like world-class central midfielder would certainly help.
Yeah, 100%.
Although now I feel like I've put Rice and Phillips' efforts in the, not in the bin, but because they are quite.
I have to say as well, I do want to
Rice
big
was
shout
brilliant
out.
in the final. Yeah,
I thought Rice in the final was out of this world. He was so good in the final, and as soon as he came off, I thought we looked immediately worse. To be honest with you,
only one sort of willing to. He was like progress with the ball, like
exactly
run at pace. Yeah.
And I wasn't convinced he had that in his locker, either, Declan Rice. I think he proved himself to be an excellent breakout man, full of energy, consistently making the right decisions. But on Sunday against the Italians, he showed real ability to progress the ball with his feet, especially dribbling in little tight spaces in the flanks. I thought that is a massively positive sign for whatever big club gets their hands on him.
The fact he felt a little bit more like uninhibited, or like a bit more free to try that sort of thing in the final, like bodes well in terms of his temperament. So yeah, and what is he, just turning 22? Like unreal. But yeah, so my thoughts, in short, pretty convoluted and messy, Henry.
Nice. I think just the fact that him and Mason Mount grew up together and then have gone on to achieve all these things, play for England, I think that's just one of the nicest stories. But anyway, that's it for today's podcast. Chris and Joe, thank you very much for joining me. Dreams do come true. It was good fun. Joe, what are you working on Snapchat? What should people go check out while they can?
Yeah, come over on Snapchat. We've got 2 different channels you can watch us on there. We've got We Need to Talk, which is kind of viral news stories every day. And we've also got Transfer Talk, which is a update on the transfer news every 3 days. So you can tune into either of those channels.
Lovely stuff. And Chris, what was your latest one-on-one?
I was ranking kits, actually, because it's a weird old point in the season, isn't it, where for the next week... Actually, now we should be moving into transfers pretty seamlessly. But yeah, it was a bit up in the air. But it's done pretty well, actually. People apparently like me just slating kits. So long may it continue. Might I roll out part 2?
Was it the Villa kit where the badge is just weirdly close to the sort of change of colour in the sleeve that I saw?
Yeah, it's unbelievably close to the shoulder. It's almost clean off the shirt. But yeah, special mention to Barcelona's shirt. Absolute, ungodly, awful.
Yeah, it's one of the worst I've ever seen.
Like the shorts. You think the shirt's bad and make your way down to the shorts. Woeful.
Who is running that club? That is a question that needs to be answered right now. All right. Well, cheers, boys. Really enjoyed that. And thank you guys at home for listening, or if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you've liked and subscribed to the Football Daily Extra Time podcast channel. We're putting out content every week, and we'll see you next time. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.